My belief is you can't have autonomy over your time unless you're self-employed.
I need to be the voice of the people, and I need to make sure in every situation I raise this and I say, no, that's not okay. All the jobs said preferable a degree to X standard in any, X, Y, and Z subjects. Only apply if you got this, this, this. And I had like 1% of this, this, and this. Desperation applying is also something that is real. Employers can smell that. So you need to be very intentional about what you're applying for. And then when you do, you need to be like a dog with a bone. You need to be relentless. Corporate tech world is very pale, male and stale. Yeah, I guess I just like giving unsolicited advice.
Just go for it. I mean, as we've said before, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Why don't you go and say that then? Why can't you be the first?
Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Maya with us. Maya, do you just quickly want to introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Maya. They always say Maya, and I have to always say Maya, but it's Maya. And I am a technical architect, but my main happiness in life is podcasting. So I'm a Londoner. I transitioned from working in the fitness industry into working in tech back in 2020.
Wow. And I'm going to just dive straight in because reading your story, it was one of the first things that piqued my interest. What the heck is a technical architect?
So a technical architect is essentially like how you would imagine a building architect, coming up with the blueprints, coming up with the diagrams, how's this all going to work? So for any technical solution, there's a technical architect to work out how every system is going to speak to each other and how it's all going to work on like a very basic diagram level, and then it's the diagrams and the blueprints that we then give to the developers. So obviously if it was a building architect, that's the plans you would give to the builder. And then you just keep working with them and saying, okay, this is how that works. They'll come and check with you and say, are we sure we're doing this? And you'll be like, oh, actually I think we should change this, or whatever it might be. So you just basically work as like a building architect would work, but in a technical solution manner. But 90% of my job is translation. I just translate between developers and technical people and the people with the money.
Fair enough. So it's almost like taking it, obviously, like you say, translating it, and also I can imagine translating it in layman's terms, because I'm not as advanced as you, but a bit of a tech head myself. So oftentimes you'll say something and go, okay, I need to explain that in a terminology that you're actually going to understand.
Exactly.
What does day-to-day look like for you?
So I work for a consultancy, and we have clients. So the client will have a project, I'll get drafted onto that project, and then my life will just be taken up with that, really. I'll just have endless meetings, endless calls. I'd like to set my tone very early from any project I'm on and say to the business analyst that I'll be working with and the project manager, like, I am happy to help anyone at any time, because I am, but please don't add me to unnecessary calls, because when you work in tech or you're the techiest person in the room or on the call, people just want you there. They don't need you, they just want you. And it becomes very draining. So I guess my day has lots of meetings. I have lots of presentations because like you said, I need to present from something that's very technical to something that's not. And then a small portion of my day is actually the architecture, which is like making the diagrams and understanding how that works with that, and working out who I need to speak to understand how we're going to access that system and stuff like that.
So from what you've just said, it sounds as if it's quite a full-on role in terms of like day-to-day. It's quite like a time drain's the wrong word, but it's the one that comes to mind. So how do you manage like this common phrase of work-life balance?
What is that? No, I'm joking. I think probably because, which I'm sure we're going to get onto, I was a self-employed pre and postnatal personal trainer. So I can really value and see the benefit in having a day from 9 to 5 that you're employed, and then from 5 p.m. the time is yours.
Yeah.
So I think because I have had the other reality where that wasn't the case and I was my own advert 24/7, when I'm in a situation like this where actually, yeah, it is full on and I have got a lot of work to do, but I am doing things I'm, good at and I've chosen to get into, and there are people who are always willing to help. It's not that bad. So it's like, my day might start at 9:15, just like most people's does. And then by about 3 p.m, I've had about 5 meetings and I've just literally just looked up twice from my desk and it's 3 p.m. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it's not that bad. There's only a couple more hours until we're finished now. Whereas when I was self-employed, even though I really enjoyed it, everything was great, there is no off time. It doesn't matter that it's 5 p.m, 6 p.m. You might still have a client. A client might be able to only do 9 p.m. every Tuesday, for example. And then what? So I guess my balance is that I'm very strict on my rules of like from 5 p.m, don't contact me. And if I need to do something and something takes higher priority, such as my health of a loved one or anything like that, I'm there because I really understand that, unless it's your own business, no one is going to care about you the way that you need them to, and they would replace you like that. So that's something I encourage everyone to take on board. Like, your work would replace you. Please make sure you're good before anything else.
Yeah, and it's the first thing I say to anyone is like, always remember, if you're owning the company, they're helping you build your dream, not their dream. So you employ them for that set amount of time or that task. Yes. And other than that, they can do as they please.
Absolutely. And I think, I have a definite privilege working in tech because, we are quite... People need us with the way that the world's going. Like, tech is extremely employable and people really need the support of a technical person. So you can sort of command things where in other industries and areas, I know you can't do the same. So I guess that is a good plus.
Definitely. And one thing I definitely want to ask you about is obviously that transition from working as a PT to what you do now. Obviously, I know a lot of people myself that are in that situation where they kind of want to do something different, but they don't know where to start and they don't know about retraining, and it's just a bit of that whole area is a bit of a minefield. How did you manage that transition? Like, how did you start it to then get you to where you are now?
I mean, I should probably preface with the type of person I am. I did the business chemistry test, which a lot of people do at work, and my one was like full marks for driver. So I'm very much a person who like jumps straight in, 2 feet in, doesn't let myself get held back by I'm not qualified for this, I don't know this, that doesn't concern me. I feel like because my starting point was very much, I built a business and employed myself and I was successful and I was getting a lot of that, I guess, fed back to me by the women I was helping. I don't have that self-doubt that does get in the way for a lot of people. So that's the first thing. Because I usually don't say that, and then I just say what I did and people are like, what? I've got to say it's because there was no self-doubt holding me back. So basically I just literally decided I want to get into tech. Did a bit of research, very minimal. What does that mean? What are the tech jobs? I didn't know anything about tech. I thought tech just meant sitting in a corner in a dark office and in a basement somewhere hacking the government. That's literally what I thought it meant. And I did a full stack developer course, so I learned how to code and then deploy like an app or a website or whatever was in my task. I joined a lot of like groups that were for other women in the same position as me, people either already established in tech or transitioning into tech. And then I started applying for jobs. Simple as that. And I think this is the thing, like a lot of people do really struggle with imposter syndrome, and it's almost that you're always chasing the next credibility tick. You're always chasing the next qualification, or chasing the next exam or whatever you think you need to get before you're at a certain level. And I guess probably because I didn't go to university, I have always known that like I'm always going to be coming from somewhat of a deficit because I don't have a degree. So I need to really bring my A game and talk the talk and learn on the way. So I'm very much I don't care about knowing everything. I don't care about having the perfect answer or the perfect product. We just get me into something and I'll learn from there. And that's literally what I did. Before I'd even got my certificate of completing my course, I had an interview for my first job. It was at a startup. I was going in there as a solutions manager, which is just a made up title so they could underpay you. But actually it was I guess you were quite in between the business analyst, technical analyst kind of role. But because it was a startup, the experience was really good. So some days I was working with the devs and learning and shadowing what they were doing. Some days I was doing what they were doing. Some days I was doing like a lot of leadership kind of stuff. Some days it was actually my job. Loads of different things, as is always the way in startups. And then after that, I thought, do you know what? I'm not really progressing here. It's not that I'm not progressing. It's that I'm not progressing at the rate I want to progress. And it's not because I'm not good or I'm not proving myself. It's because of the politics in this company. So how can I rectify that? And then I did a bit more research, reached out to the communities I was part of, like the coding world. Yeah. And I was just like, this is where I'm at. This is how long I've been in the game. This is where I want to get to. Anyone got any clues? And then through like lots of talking, and I just think people underestimate the power of talking to other people, finding out other people's story and just being like following up on that and just not being flaky. We live in a very flaky society now, I think, and people just don't follow through. They don't come back to you. They don't follow up on going for a coffee, none of those things. And then they wonder why these opportunities haven't just fallen into their lap. But it's like, you do need to go out there and get it. Yeah. So that's what I did. And then I decided I needed to get a technical analyst role somewhere else. So I did at an advertising agency, which was a lot of fun. But again, it was still not what I wanted to get to the next stage I needed to be in. And then after about a year of that, I was like, right, it's time again. Got to jump, got to move. And then that's when I came across the role I'm in now, which was a technical architect role, because my goal is always to be a solution architect. Yep. And these were the steps to get there. So that was pretty much it. But I guess the theme you could get from everything I'm saying is that I make a decision. I'm here long enough now. Yep. And I talk to a few people, I do a bit of research, and I start applying.
One thing that strikes me, because I think anyone listening to this, their rebuttal to doing your journey or following a similar journey to yourself might say, I haven't got time. And I don't have the capacity to do that. Because I can imagine the reason I'm asking that is because I'm looking at it going, okay, you've transitioned from a PT to now a technical architect. But there was definitely like a training period where you were kind of managing both at the same time. And then obviously then you're getting involved in the community. And I know myself, when you've got 4, 5, 6, 7 plates spinning in the air at once, it can often feel like, I want to follow through on all of this, but I'm not able to. So what would you say to people? How did you manage, particularly that beginning part, transitioning while you were still training? Because I think a lot of people that want to transition career, they're like, I want to do this training course, but I'm spending, let's say their situation is a bit different. They're in a 9-to-5 job. They're being asked to do X, Y, Z by their managers. They might have kids. They might have this, they might have that. And they go, I just haven't got the capacity to then add in a training course.
Very valid. The first thing is I was lucky because obviously I was self-employed. So I could manage my time around the hours I needed to get in for my course. Mm-hmm. And I started doing the training just as COVID hit. So everything was locked anyway. So I had nowhere to go. So it was really good timing for me.
Yep.
But even in like the jobs I've been in, when I have been in 9-to-5s and I have been having to do, upskilling and stuff to get ready for the next role, it's just a matter of having your boundaries with your job. And I think this is, again, another hard part for people to hear or take on. Like I say to my friends all the time, I'll call them in the middle of the day while I'm in the gym and they'll be like, are you not at your desk? I'm like, I've done all my work for the morning. I've told people, that I'll be back at this time. And that's it. Like, yeah. I don't know what else the conversation is, but again, it's because of I knew that's how I need to work.
Yeah.
So I then found myself in a career which could facilitate that. And I think it does come to a matter of thinking ahead as well. Like before I decided I'm going to go into tech, it wasn't just a decision I made, what's hot right now, tech. It was like, okay, let me look at the benefits. Let me look at the employability. Let me look at the maternity situation. Let me look at the pay. Let me look at the progression, all of these things. And I think there's quite a dangerous narrative, which is you need to do what you love, which is important. But especially for women, whilst we're still fighting to get to a point of pay equality, we need to up our dollars. And unfortunately, that's not always going to be something that you love. And sacrifice of a job you really feel fulfilled by could be what happens here. And it could be temporary. You can give yourself a deadline and a time, but then I just feel like there is an aspect of like some people can just be lazy sometimes. And like, if you want to get it done, you can get it done.
Yeah.
But it's easier to complain and be like, oh, I just don't have the time. I mean, I do it myself. There's so many more things I want to do, but I'm like, oh, after I've finished a whole day and I've done this and I've done that, I've done enough for today. But then equally, I'm not going to turn around and complain that I haven't done something or I'm still upset I haven't achieved something, because I know I'm the one standing in the way of me doing that.
Yeah. No, it's that whole self-accountability of being able to go, well, I didn't do this, so of course this isn't going to have moved forward miraculously.
Exactly.
Like, it's interesting that people, I think it's hard because I do feel, coming from a disability background, I know particularly in that space, employability is really tricky. So then I do have some sympathies for those individuals that are like, I keep applying for everything. I'm doing all the right things. I'm just not getting a break. So I do have some sympathy for it, but it's interesting to hear your journey and your perspective. And then the other thing I wanted to pull on as well is you mentioned there, obviously having autonomy over your time. And the reason why I'm asking this one is actually it's something me and my partner discussed recently. My belief is you can't have autonomy over your time unless you're self-employed. Now, I know you're probably going to go, ugh. So this is a common debate between me and my partner, because I'm like, it really is dependent on your employer. So would you say within the tech industry, from the experience you've got, are there more flexible working environments, flexible employers? Because I'm thinking of it of going, I know plenty of my friends that are in more traditional based jobs, and that it is your ass is fixed to that desk from X time to X time, and that's the end of the conversation. What would you say to that from your experience in tech? Is that something that you see often in tech, of like they give you quite a lot of autonomy?
Yeah. I think there is a lot of autonomy in tech, and I think it's because people don't really understand what you do. So they can't really question when you've done things or how long it's going to take you to do things, because they just don't know if it is as hard as you're saying it is or it's not. But definitely, to your point earlier as well about, speaking as a person who isn't, who like applies and you've got disabilities, so that makes it harder for you to hear back and stuff like that. I'm speaking from a massive place of privilege, an able-bodied, non-neurodiverse that I know of person who is like, I'm fully aware of that, but I am speaking to that demographic, because that is the demographic who, in my experience, complains the most and has the most excuses for why things can't be done and why they haven't done this, why they haven't done that. People who already have some kind of, I don't know what the word is, disprivilege, is they are more used to not getting things their own way. So therefore, by nature, they usually have more initiative. They're usually used to taking the longer journey round. So they try harder, I find, because you're used to it. It's the same kind of principle as like when you have immigrants who come to the UK and they work 10 times harder than typically people who are born here, because they understand what real struggle is and they've experienced it. So my point was not to those people, because I have no idea how hard.
It was more to give the example, to also give my, like, obviously coming from the community myself, if it was like, I'm not discrediting myself, self going, oh no, disabled, if you're disabled, this completely applies to you, because I know there's extra boundaries in place that are difficult. But then I would argue, to your point, is you're completely right. Of one of the things I always bang on when I talk about disability and employability is, you find a disabled person, you've basically found a problem solver. Yeah. Because 9 times out of 10, we can't do the things that everyone else does, so we've got to find a different way.
You found a way around it, regardless.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one, because this is why I started the pod, was to sort of see the commonalities of everyday life as your average Joe who doesn't have a disability, whether that's neurodiversity, whether that's a physical disability. But then also showing the links between the two, because it's something I find really intriguing, particularly being talking to yourself in the tech industry. From an outside perspective, that would be seen as quite an accessible environment, because it's kind of computer based.
This is working from home.
Yeah.
So I would, to answer this next point you said about, do you have more autonomy in tech? I think I have autonomy in tech, and a lot of it is due to the way I present. I present in a very confident and, I do know my stuff manner, but I also present that way. And I see a lot of people, especially women of colour, struggle to really advocate for how much they actually know and how much they actually can do. So it's not a coincidence they're often in roles where they're being underpaid, or they haven't gone for the promotion that they should have gone for. So I guess when I'm coming on the scene, coming from a completely different background, because I wasn't even in 9 to 5 employment until literally 4 or 5 years ago. I don't have any of that. I'm just like, why wouldn't I go and put myself for? Why wouldn't I ask for 10 more grand? I don't know why I wouldn't. Whereas a lot of people who've been in this game or the rat race for a lot longer, and also haven't had the opportunity to develop those self-confidence, self-advocating skills straight after school, they are usually the people in these environments who aren't getting what they want to get from work. So they're the ones who don't have the autonomy, because at the end of the day, what can your employer do if you are not at your desk, especially in the world where we all work from home anyway? Like, there's not really much they can do. Yes, people can say we could get fired, but the chances of that happening for you not being at your desk, and if you communicate, I'm not going to be at my desk for this time, but I'm going to make sure this and this is done, I can't see how people are being so.
I think it's an intimidation, because I think from particularly more traditional industries, like we were speaking before, my day job is in a very traditional environment. If you haven't got managers that understand and like sort of take the more modern approach, it can be very difficult to broach that conversation of, I want to be able to have the autonomy to go to the gym on my lunch break and not have to rush my workout. I think the biggest thing is the fear of rejection, but then I kind of understand it to a certain extent of, if you're in that industry and no one's really opened the conversation yet, you kind of already, you're assuming that the door's already closed.
Exactly. And that's what I fight against with people in my everyday life, my loved ones. I'll be like, well, why don't you go and say that then? Why can't you be the first? And people are scared to be that. And that is another thing that I think gets in the way of so much, because if you aren't going to be the one to say something and this is affecting you, then how do you expect anyone else to say it for you? Because you're not even saying it and it affects you.
Yeah. 100%. And I think as well is that it's funny enough, it's actually something my dad says to me all the time. The worst they can say is no.
Exactly. I literally live my life by that, and sometimes I go too far with it. But I'd rather go too far and ask and no, it's definitely not going to happen, than live in this like really debilitating fear that, what if they do this? What if they do that? And it's like, it's just not worth it. And again, like to my previous point, this is work. This pays you money, and that is all it does. If you weren't here tomorrow, it would replace you. So stop giving it I don't want to say respect, but respect that we give it.
It's more, I think it's giving it the clout that we give it. Like, it's a conversation that me and my partner have had a lot recently of like, it's both of us are guilty of it, of both sat there like, there's got to be more to life than this. of
Totally.
like just working and do it. But then I think as well, there is, to your point earlier, there is something to finding a career that you can have enjoyment from, because I think that holds a lot of power. Because I think the other issue is if you're in a situation where you feel stuck and
Yeah.
you're not enjoying what you're doing and you're like, oh, I want to get out of this and I want to get out of this now, but that's not possible.
Yeah.
That can be quite debilitating. So
I would argue that if you're not going to have the job that you love, you need to make sure you have something you really love doing in your life. If it's a passion project, if it's a project, if it's a hobby, whatever it might be. And I would also argue that like you have to accept that any job, whether you love it or not, you are still going to have to sacrifice 90% of your time doing it. So you better make sure that the benefits, the pay, the compensation, all of that is top notch for you, because you're going to be there all the time. So I think for people who, like myself or someone who's in an industry adjacent to or similar to tech, where there is a lot of autonomy and there is a lot of benefits and there is a lot of all these things, even if there are days where we're like, I'm so bored, there's no part of me that loves this, like the other things make up for it.
Yeah.
But I find a lot of people are in a situation where there's no love, there's no benefits, there's no pay. And I'm just like, I don't understand then. I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah.
It's really confusing for me. So, I think people just need to be a bit more intentional with that, and also take a look at the climate that we're in. You know, yes, it's very doom and gloom because it's a cost of living crisis. Everything is the most expensive it's ever been, but also it's the age of information. There's so much opportunity everywhere you go. So don't limit yourself to think, oh, I could only do this because I've only seen people do this and my mum did this and my dad did that and my uncle did. No, try and open your mind a bit and really step out.
And also I wanted to come on to something you mentioned earlier, because it's actually it's really impactful and also really true from the friends that I've got. How have you seen what's the environment for women in tech at the moment? Because obviously there's a lot of conversations around the gender pay gap, but particularly in tech industry, it's like stereotype that, oh, it's these pimply men with like glass. That's the stereotype, and obviously that's not the case. But also I can imagine as a woman yourself, it can be quite difficult to get into a male dominated industry.
So I think another thing that prepared me for this was working in the fitness industry. Fitness industry is also very male dominated in a different way, because it's more like you are appreciated for being a woman in a male environment, not because you're particularly of your skills, but just because men appreciate being around women. So that's the first thing. I was used to being around a lot of men and just being okay with that. You said previously it's full of pimply men and etc. I would even go one step further, which is that the real corporate tech world is very pale, male and stale. I wouldn't say that there is much diversity there at all. And I just mean diversity in terms of men and women, let alone like ethnic diversity or body diversity, none of that. So I've got to a stage now where I've realised it, because we had some kind of like training, some diversity training the other day, where they were talking about this, and I realised I don't even notice when I'm the only woman on the call, and I am the only woman on the call majority of the time. And I think that to answer your question, how does it feel or what's it like being a woman in tech? I think if you are comfortable and you know going in that you are going to be one of the few women, and you can, again, advocate for yourself, make sure you get the help and the support that you need when you need it, and you ask for things that you deserve as you deserve them, I think it can be fine. I think it's just like any other industry. But it's when women come in not expecting that and thinking it's going to be different, that it can be bad. And then also what we have is a new generation of women. So I would class myself in that generation of women who've accepted what I've just said, and also know the importance of coming into tech to take up space and to make sure there are more of us here, and there are women doing these things. And there are great initiatives now like Tech Women 100 awards and things like that. But there are women who are like from the generation above me who are not really with that mindset. And they're very much like, no, women should adhere to being seen and not heard. No, we shouldn't ask for too much. We're still women at the end of the day. Let's not upset the men.
Yeah.
And that can be quite difficult because you get into this environment, you see women, you're like, yes, great. I'm going to have a work mum. She's going to show me the ropes. She's going to protect me. She's going to help me. And actually she's just trying to oppress you more. And it's just like, oh, I really thought I'd made a break here. But, I think, again, that's just something that you learn to deal with as you go.
What would you say on the topic of like bringing women into tech? What would you say to someone who's maybe leaving school and going, I think I want to go into tech, but I'm concerned with it being a male-dominated industry as I'm a woman. What would you say to that in terms of, I know you spoke briefly there about all the different initiatives now available within tech, but I think as we've spoken about a lot already, it's that mental block for a lot of people.
I think build your community, number one. Like I said, that was the first thing I did, and that's to this day been super helpful for me. And also, don't let that be an obstacle. When you really get out there into the world, you realize that most industries, sadly, are run by, and the powers that be are men. You may not see them on the ground as much, but they are the people who are making the decisions. In tech, it's just a bit more upfront. So that's how you have to look at it. If you can cope with that and you are in there, you're in a good position because, like I said, there's not many of you. So if you say, actually, this isn't right for me and I don't like this, and as a woman, this makes me feel X, Y, and Z, they'll listen because there's no one else they can fact check that with.
Yeah.
So you can use it to your advantage, but I'm not going to pretend that it's easy. And every day when I'm really tired and drained and I get on a call with another group of 5 men, I'm thrilled, but it's just something that I've come to cope with. It's part of the job.
It's also, I think, as well, even just having these conversations, it's that whole thing of you've just got to be really strong-willed. And I think, that can often be quite difficult because of, like you say, it's that whole thing of if you've got someone within your family or within your circle that is a bit more old school, developing that mindset can be quite tricky. And I say that as well of like, I know plenty of men with the same mindset, and like I am the biggest person for overanalyzing everything. So guilty as charged there. But I think, it's about just go for it. I mean, as we've said before, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Exactly that. And I would also say to anybody getting into tech, just really do your research about what it is you want to do in tech, because a lot of people have no idea, just like I didn't. They go straight and do a full stack developer course, then they're angry because they realize actually this isn't what I want to work in. It's just like going to uni, I guess, and doing a degree. If you don't do enough research before you go and do the degree, and you just do the degree because, I don't know, your mum told you to do it, for example, you then don't find that you actually enjoy doing the job of the degree you just spent money on. It can be the same thing. So do your research. There's a lot more accessible information now on what tech roles are, what they mean, how you get into them. I've been on a few podcasts and I've like signposted myself as someone that people can come to, which I have instantly regretted because I have and I don't, it's not because I don't want to help people, but I have a lot of things, information, podcasts, episodes where I talk about it out there, that's there. So please access that first. And then if you have a question off the back of anything there, because I guarantee you I've probably answered your question in those things, then come to me. But people will just come to you, ask the same questions that I've probably already said in this episode. And then I'm just like, oh, why did I say that? So please, if you do want to reach out, listen to everything else I've done, find out the stuff I've spoken about this on, and then come to me after that, because I'm pretty sure it'll be answered.
Same is, to be honest, it's the same thing, but they're not. I think my approach is a bit different because I get the weird questions. There's a bit of an entertainment value for myself of like, so how does a wheelchair work? And you're like, really, we're going down that route. That's but the other thing I wanted to ask you is, obviously you mentioned about the courses and people jumping straight into courses. What is the average length of? I mean, I know it's a very broad question, and you're probably going to get how long's a bit of string. But for someone that's looking to transition, a lot of people will be wondering how quickly can I transition. So how long are tech courses usually?
I mean, the one I did was about a year. And I say about a year because it could have been longer had I had other responsibilities.
Yep.
such as kids, a 9 to 5, etc. But I was able to concentrate a lot of my time on the course. But then it could have also been shorter if I had had, I don't know, less breaks and less enjoyment of my life. I could have done it even quicker. So I guess it's about how long is it going to take you to learn a new language if you do it intensely, because that is what tech is. And especially if you're learning coding, it is new languages. Yeah. So how long is that going to take you? What kind of learner are you? And that's how you're going to get to the bottom of how long it's going to take you to learn something. But I don't think that the course teaches you really. The course gives you the basics. The course gives you the confidence to say words that are technical. And then your knowledge and your learning is going to come from your job. So my advice to everyone would always be, do whatever you got to do to get the job, and you go from there. And like my mum always says as well, no matter what you do, even if you're not trained in it, after 5 months there, you'll know how to do it. So just bear that in mind.
Valid point. And it brings me on quite nicely to a question I was going to ask, which is, would you say the tech industry is more focused on what qualifications you hold, or would it be more based on the experience you hold? And on that note, what advice would you give to particularly new starters? Because one of the hardest things, no matter what industry you're going into, if you're fresh out of school, one of the hardest things is getting your first job, because they go, get some experience. Where?
Experience to get experience. Yeah. Again, I don't want to say it sounds like a cop-out, but a lot of this is down to my personality. When I was applying for jobs, all the jobs said preferable a degree to X standard in any, X, Y, and Z subjects, or something equivalent. So that's why my diploma from my course was the equivalent I would have. And then it also said only apply if you got this, this, this. And I had like 1% of this, this, and this, but I still applied. And I didn't just apply on by sending my CV. I would find, my best method of finding jobs was on LinkedIn. I'd find the job on LinkedIn. I would then go on the website of where the job, whatever the job was. I would apply through their website, and then I would go back on LinkedIn, find the hiring manager, and not DM them, whatever you call on LinkedIn, Connect, personal message, whatever. Yeah. And just be like, hi, I've just sent my CV, or I've just completed your application, just so you can put a face to the name. This is who I am. Would love to hear back soon, or look forward to hearing back soon, either way, something like that. And in some cases I would call up, I would follow up, I would chase up. And in every single time I've been successful, they've always said it's because of the message or the call or whatever the thing I did, that did it for us, because it just shows your hunger. It shows your follow through. It shows your professionalism. And there's a difference between hungry and desperate. Desperation applying is also something that is real. I've done it, where I've been in a place where I'm like, oh my God, I just can't stand being here anymore. I just need to reply to everything and just get something. Employers can smell that. It comes across in how you're presenting. So you need to be very intentional about what you're applying for. And then when you do, you need to be like a dog with a bone. You need to be relentless, messaging them, following up, when can I hear back, etc. Because like you said about, the worst they can say is no. The worst you're going to get from this is just more experience. You'll get more experience of interview. You'll get more experience of these people. You'll get to say, oh, I interviewed with whatever that place is. That's all. So to come back to your point of like, how do you apply and what do you let hold you back? Get into that mindset. Get into the mindset that you are going to be rejected, but you are going to be successful. Like, someone has to say yes at some point. So apply for things that you think you could do, but more so that you think you could learn to do, and just always follow up.
What would you say? I know I keep playing devil's advocate. I apologize. But what would you say to people that think, but I don't want to get in over my head? Because that's something I'm asking that question. It's something I've thought of, like, you don't want to get in over your head, because then it can often feel like the water's rising and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this one.
I just think that that's something you've got to be ready for. Like I said, it's a new language. I think none of us remember what it was like to learn how to walk because we were kids. But it's similar to that. It's anything like that. Anything that's scary is eventually, obviously within reason, is eventually going to be good for you. Nothing grows in the comfort zone. So if this doesn't feel scary, if this doesn't feel a bit like, oh, what am I doing? Then you're not getting anything from it. You've changed career, or you've tried to transition into something because you weren't happy where you were before. If you quit before you even give this a go, what was the point of leaving what you were in before?
Yeah.
So again, it's just about getting into the mental. It's about fighting your inner self, telling you this is so scary, I can't do this, because that's the only thing getting in your way. And I know I sound really idealistic, and I'm the first to be really honest with people and say, look, there are barriers. Yes, it isn't the same for everyone. No, if you just work hard, you don't always make it. I will 100% be honest about that. But in terms of actually trying, because that's what we're talking about at the end of the day, it's about people quit before they've even tried. Always try, and then you can review. But don't just get to the point where, I've referred so many people I know who are so capable to jobs I've been in, to existing roles, and they've got on the phone with my employer at the time, and the employer's been like, right, you need to do this, this, and this, because the employer obviously wants to squeeze everything they can from the potential person because they're an employer. And then the person has been scared away instantly and been like, oh, they use this word and I don't know what that word means, so I think it'll be a bit too technical for me. And I'm like, it's literally everything you tell me you do in your day job now, but for double the money. Like, trust me, I think you'll be fine. And they're like, no, I think and I'm just like, okay, because I've learned that stuff in your head is so powerful. I could say it till I'm blue in the face and nobody's going to follow it. You have to have that excitement, curiosity, fearlessness inside you to go and do it.
Completely right. It's like that whole, and again, I'm saying this as someone that battles with it themselves. It's that whole not getting rid of, but not always listening to that internal voice. Sometimes the internal voice is great, other times not so much, and it's very tricky to do. So I do caveat it with, like, particularly having lived experience of it. It's sometimes you just get caught up in your own head. But I wanted to come on to another topic, and you briefly mentioned it earlier, which is where did the love of podcasting come from?
I have always been a very talkative person. I've always had a lot to say. I've always had a lot of opinions. And I realised that the people in my life, like I just told you, don't always appreciate constant, lectures from me and me telling them to quit their job and do something else, or telling them they could be doing this, and they're the ones holding themselves back. So I think I just needed somewhere else to channel and put all of that energy. So I thought podcasting's great. This is a great way of doing it. And the podcast I have now is not my first. I had a podcast before that a couple of years ago with two other ladies, and that one stopped around COVID, and I still had this itch to want a podcast. I really enjoyed it, and I think that I have I have a lot of good advice and a good message to spread. So I feel like podcasting is a way to spread that, as you will agree, being a podcaster yourself.
Yep.
So that's where it came from, really. And I guess I just like giving unsolicited advice.
What would you say, for anyone that doesn't know your podcast, what would you say the main inspiration for it was?
I don't feel like there's a lot of diverse voices, and I don't mean diverse is quite I don't really like the word. It's just like a very clickbaity word now, but I mean, there is no real conversation from people who are non-white, non-male, the obvious, basically. Speaking on topics that affect us, because we aren't in the conversation often, so therefore it just gets completely left behind. And we exist. There are people who are wanting the representation, and I've myself would have loved to have had someone like me to listen to, learn from, speak to, anything like that, and I didn't. So I've always had a deep yearning to be the representation I never had, and I guess through PT as well, I realized how much it can help people and the inspiration it gives people. So I wanted to do that, and I wanted to speak on topics which are not spoken about but should be, and they should be like normal topics that we speak about all the time, because they affect a big bunch of us, but we just shy away and we'd rather just have surface conversations, and then we wonder why nothing changes.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting listening to that, because there's so much similarities to that, to why we started the Not Quite Pod, of basically the whole ethos around it. And originally was talking about disability in a fun and friendly way, because essentially it's that whole thing of, it's like the dirty word.
It's left out of the conversation.
Yeah, everyone goes, oh, can I say this? Can't I say this? Can I do this? Can't I do this? And it's that whole thing of, as you say, it's that representation, but also I feel like, and maybe you feel similar in your space as well, of they overcomplicate it. It can get caught up in it's like a conversation should be a two-way conversation of very much like it's not being interrogated. It's someone learning about something, and you have to give people the benefit of the doubt when it comes to learning something, because they are going to use the wrong terminology, the wrong, like, it's going to happen. You got to allow people to make that mistake. So that it's just interesting that you've felt the same in your space of going, why are we shying away from these conversations? But also, why are we making these conversations more complicated than they need to be?
Yeah. And also, why are we trying to, I don't know if this is to your point or different, but I don't like that I feel like the reason there aren't that many diverse voices is because we try to dim it down so much to make it so palatable, and nobody ever gets offended, and you can never question your own behaviors. And, and I feel like, no, we need to actually, sometimes people who are doing the things which are ignorant or unfriendly should be hearing that that's not okay.
Yeah.
And I think there's not enough of that. So it's not like I'm, on a hate fest on my podcast, but I don't hide, and I don't shy away from saying things that I know some people would feel a bit funny about. So that's why at first I used to get really upset, because I'm like, everyone I speak to who listens to the pod really enjoys it, but why is it not getting the same amount of traction as this, or getting the same amount of followers or subscription or anything it might be? But at the end of the day, if you're not trying to appeal to the masses, then you're not going to. So that's just it.
I think to come on to your point, it's that for me, it's that thing of, in my space, is very much managing that this is often something I've debated on here, of if I'm abrasive as a disabled individual, with someone who wants to, is not even wants to learn, let's say ask a question out in public, that is the viewpoint of which they're going to see the majority of the disabled community. Mm-hmm. So this is the debate that I often have with friends of, like, yeah, but you shouldn't hold that responsibility. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for the community, because if we send one other dickhead into the community, it's a bad idea. So, and it's also, as well, you can always tell the intent behind someone. And I imagine you feel the same, of like, when someone's unintentionally being a dick and when they're intentionally being a dick.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have to accept as well that, like you've previously said, people are going to be the product of their environment. Yeah. If you're the first disabled person they've ever spoken to, then obviously they're going to be a bit less clued up. Yeah. But if you are not, if you're the 15th, then we shouldn't still be getting this wrong. Yeah. So I guess, and it's that whole thing as well of giving people the benefit of the doubt to the point earlier of make mistakes, of like, no one's infallible. Like, I might be, in some people's eyes, the encyclopedia of disability, but I'll use the wrong terminology. I'll get caught out by it and be like, oh shit. But you just hold your hands up and go, yeah, my bad. Yeah, that was me. So I think it's about having these conversations, but also allowing people space to breathe and not turning into, it's hard because there is an element of wanting to inspire people, but not turning into a TED talk. Yeah, particularly like it depends on the scenario. Obviously, if we're talking podcast episodes, that's a completely different. You can be as creative and as TED talky. So like, I'm more looking at it from like a out in public general conversation of like, well, no one wants to be interrogated in a pub. No, definitely not. But then also, I would, if I don't have the energy and it's going to drain me, I would just remove myself, because I can't keep having the same conversation. So it's also about having your own boundaries, which is something I didn't know before and I've had to learn, where I took it on like, I need to be the voice of the people and I need to make sure in every situation I raise this and I say, no, that's not okay. But actually, it isn't okay, and I don't want to hear you talk about it. So I'm just gonna sit somewhere else, because I don't have time for that today.
Because it's also the other thing I argue with situations like that is creating like a referral culture, I like to call it, of like, okay, like, because we have this debate in the disabled community all the time, like, I shouldn't have to be on all the time explaining my disability. Yes, valid. But then also, particularly when we talk of people working in the social media space, but you are perfectly capable of going, dude, I'm not got the energy. Go talk to Charlie. He's like a bundle of energy.
Exactly. If people have signposted themselves to do it, then let them.
Yeah. It's interesting. As I say, I'm more diving into this quite a lot because it's so interesting that there's so many similarities between the two spaces. It's really, I find really interesting. But also, do you like when obviously you've said yourself you've run 2 different podcasts, and obviously that's been, one was pre-COVID and obviously now. There's this common debate, and it's something I've thought about myself as well, of like, do you feel the podcast space is becoming oversaturated? Everyone and their nan's got a podcast.
Yes. Absolutely, I do. But I also feel like, as you'll probably know, if you have a podcast and it lasts longer than a year, you're already in the top, 10% or something, because it is such a hard game. You don't get anything back for it. You spend all your money on it. It's not, it's very hard to find the benefit unless you love it. That's the only reason. And so people, although, you can say that about anything. I remember when I first got Instagram, for example, it was brand new. It was a really new thing. It was quite easy to get a lot of followers, etc. Now you're hustling for the likes. So everything has got oversaturated, but it's only the real, authentic voices on every platform which does prevail. So that gives me some comfort sometimes. Sometimes I cry myself to sleep, but sometimes
I hear that.
Sometimes I'm like, do you know what? That isn't my mission anyway, so it's fine.
Would you, if anyone asked you as a new podcaster coming in, what would you say? Would you say steer clear? Would you say go for it, but here's some caveats? What would you say?
I would say, be clear about what your mission is. Be open to your mission changing.
Yeah.
And if you love it, do it. But that's my motto for life, as you know.
Yeah, 100%.
If you love it, do it. If you want to do it, do it. If there's a change you need to make it.
Yeah. As you said, I think you hit in that head when you said that it's that whole thing of people don't realize the time that goes into it. So if you are listening to this and you want to start your own podcast, my advice is always the same of, yes, it can be great fun, but it's also a massive time commitment. So get ready for that. But
also the expectation and the standards that you need to be as a new podcast now versus when I guess myself and yourself started. I started again back in 2017 when podcast, nobody even knew what a podcast was.
Yeah. It
was so easy to get people to listen because they're like, oh wow, what's this? It's exciting. They're like, oh wow. Yep. Now because it's so popular, just because it's popular alone, people don't want to engage because it's something that's popular. And some people don't like to do the popular thing. That's why some people just boycott certain artists or series because they're like, oh, everyone's doing it. I don't want that. So that you're fighting with that already.
Yeah.
And then you're also fighting with the fact that now it has become quite popular and people who celebrities and influencers have got on the trend. They've got money. So they also put a lot of money into this for the graphics, for the sound, for everything. So now the average Joe is expecting all podcasts to be like that. So if you're at home recording on your laptop and the sound's crackly, it doesn't sound it's not going to be as appealing. Yeah. So your entry point has to be higher as well.
Yeah, you're completely right. And it's that whole thing of we hold ourselves to the standard of those that are way ahead of us. It's that whole thing of people want to run before they can walk.
Always.
But then I'd say guilt is charged. I'm the same.
No, same. So am I. That's why I cry because I'm like, why are they doing so much better than me? And I'm like, they literally went on Love Island first. Of course they're going to.
Maybe that's where we're going wrong.
I mean, it will take a lot. I don't know if I love podcasting that much.
I'm just going to spin on to the topic we haven't really touched on because it was in the very beginning of your story, but also there's a very strong link of you're all about girl power. Where did you come into the fitness industry and in terms, especially within your speciality? Where did that journey start? In terms of, where did the idea come from? What made you want to get involved with it?
So I entered the fitness industry again straight after doing my A-levels. So I was 18 and that's 10 years ago. So what we see of the fitness industry now, the fact that it's quite normal for there to be a gym on every street, the fact that, it's normal to have women in the gym, all of those things were not norms a decade ago. Women were barely getting in the gym and it was only sad to say, but women who are more well off, who are even privy to having the accessibility to things like a gym membership or a nice gym, or being in a space where they felt comfortable enough for, safe, I guess.
Yeah.
So I was in one of those environments in that time. So that made it very easy to get clients because there weren't many women that other women wanted to train with. However, it also made it quite a scary time because there were men in the gym were men in the gym. So I was very spoken to very inappropriately. I was sexualized a lot. I was young as well. So I was quite naive, etc. So I quickly realized, if I'm open to training men and women here, this is probably just going to make my life quite difficult because I would get so many propositions from men where they would be like, oh, can you stretch me out? Can you this? Can you that? Not take seriously that I'm actually a personal trainer like everyone else.
Yeah, professional.
Exactly. So I realized it's just going to make my life easier if I just specialize for women. So I did, and women have a habit of getting pregnant. So when they got pregnant, they wanted to carry on. It wasn't me. I was conditioned like the rest of the world to think that when you're pregnant, you shouldn't even walk. But again, they were like, no, you can still train me. So I did the qualification, and I did the reading, I did the research, and I got myself pre and postnatal trained. And then I continued, and then that became my niche. And then I would have women, sourcing me out just because I could do that, and they were pregnant, they wanted to train. And then I left the gym I was working for, and I just did it fully self-employed. And again, I was just a pre and postnatal PT. So that was it.
Do you ever miss it?
I do miss having my own time. When I first started having a 9 to 5, I didn't understand that you only get Saturday and Sunday off, and you only have 25 days of holiday per year. I remember having a conversation with my best friend, and I was like, I can't believe this. And she came out of school, went to uni, done law. She had a very traditional trajectory. So she was like, listen, it's fine. You work from 9 to 5, you finish at 4:30, you start winding down around then. You've got the evening. That's a long time. You've got about 6 hours before you go to bed. And then on the weekends, you do something Friday night. So it doesn't feel like you've just got Saturday and Sunday. You do something Friday night as well. And then you plan your holiday, plan it around bank holidays. All these things I had to learn. That is the little hacks of surviving. It was a rude awakening. So I do miss that. However, I always knew that I wanted to work towards that aspect of self-employed life again. So I feel like, again, in tech, you can contract work, or you can work for certain companies which only require you to work for certain months or times of the year, and you can have that kind of lifestyle. But it's not easy, and it does take some time to get there, but you can be on the journey. So I wait for the day where my holidays are my holidays again, and I have longer than just 2 days a week to recover. But until then, this isn't that bad.
It's interesting because one thing I've found interesting being involved in fitness myself and spent a lot of time in sport is, do you feel like you fell out of love with fitness?
I didn't fall out of love with fitness for myself. In fact, my fitness and strength and everything improved since not being a personal trainer. But I fell out of love of giving so much energy on a human level. As a personal trainer, you become someone's therapist, basically, and you're just giving and giving and giving. And it's a lot of dealing with people alone is hard. So you're contacting them to get their times to go and see them, and then they change their mind, or they have something happen, and then that changes this and that. It has a whole trajectory effect on your life. And I don't miss that. And I also don't miss being my own advert all the time. And it's a lot of pressure. The fitness industry is quite unhinged and very, very biased and very bodyist and fat shaming and all these things. And for a young woman, it can be very detrimental to your mental health. So I was always aware of that. And, it'd be like, if you tell someone you're a personal trainer, they already feel on edge because they feel like you're judging them. you're not, but they feel like you are. And then you might, I don't know, want to indulge and have a chocolate cake. And someone will be like, oh, but you're a personal trainer. And it's like the police, like the vegan police, the eating police, the fitness police, all of the polices. And it's just like, oh my God, leave me alone. And also for me, it was the dependency on social media that I couldn't stand. Like my whole life had to be on social media. Because like I said, back in the day, Instagram was your free advert. That was, again, how I got a lot of my clients. So I had to use Instagram a lot and always be posting fitness content, always be thinking about it. Now I've traded that in for my podcast content. So I'm always thinking about that. But at least that isn't attached to how I pay my bills, which is helpful.
And also it's that whole thing of always having, like you say, always having to be on, and particularly in the fitness industry, it's so much based around the way you look.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Not how you sound or what you're talking about.
Or your skill set. Like I know so many PTs that they've got amazing specialist areas and they will smash it out of the park in those areas, but because they don't fit the look, it doesn't work.
100%, exactly.
And to your point as well, it's that whole, the thing of the only people judging you in a gym is normally meatheads. Personal
Even
trainers
them, they're usually too self-involved. So they don't, you know.
It's the fitness industry, I think, has changed a lot recently. Like I got swept up in the YouTube like space. I think, what are we talking now? 12 years ago now? Probably even longer. It's so, I feel like it's got worse. I'm going to be honest. I feel like it's got worse than it was 10 years ago. It feels so much more, it's all about posting the pictures rather than, I mean, again, guilty as charged, did that stuff. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but it's interesting how I feel like we're going backwards. Would you say the same?
I feel like whilst the industry is like that, people are more switched on to the fact that the industry is like that.
Yeah.
So I have a bit of hope there. But I'm not going to say it's not the case, because I have conversations with people all the time. Like, it always amazes me that women, so many women I know who aren't particularly active, they might do an hour of gym a day, which is quite active, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But for the rest of their day, they are sedentary. And they are so obsessed with how much protein they're eating. But they're missing their breakfast. They barely have lunch. Their dinner is sometimes a chocolate bar, but goodness me, they can tell you all the grams of protein they're having in their protein shake. And it's like, where is the priorities here? We really need to get back to basics. So yeah, I'd like to think that the general consensus is getting more intelligent when it comes to health and fitness. It's not even optional anymore. Like, it's everywhere you see, you have to be a bit aware.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the right information is being filtered through yet. I think we've still got a few more years before that happens.
I think you're right. And I'm lastly going to ask you a question that you've sort of brought me on to quite nicely. And I'm intrigued, being obviously naturally quite sedentary because of circumstance. How do you manage now, where you've transitioned to more of a sedentary role within working? How do you manage getting moving and sort of maintaining that? Because I know naturally when anyone's involved in sport or fitness, they've got that like bit in the back of the head going, I really should like get moving and do something. How do you manage that? Obviously, we've spoke a bit about managing your time and getting a session in on your lunch break. But how have you found that transition? Because I can imagine it's quite tricky is the wrong word, but it's quite
an adjustment.
Yeah, drastic change from constantly being on your feet at a gym to, okay, now I'm 9 times out of 10 at my desk.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I haven't felt that much of an adjustment because in my life, I still do walk around, move around a lot. Like, I've got to if I go to visit someone, I usually cycle rather than drive or take the public transport if I can avoid it. And that's not because I am trying to get my miles in. It's more because I just much prefer being able to listen to a podcast or be on a phone call whilst on the move, getting fresh air, moving, getting there at a time I know I will get there, than relying on TFL, the delays, the traffic, all of that. I'd rather. So I do that. I have movement in my everyday and my weekends and my time, and I'm just strict with my boundaries. Like, if people try to put meetings into my morning session, or if I'm having a lunch lunch session and I'll just decline. Like, this is my time. Sorry. So, that's it really. And in terms of like being stuck at a desk, I think I transitioned into that not as brutally, because don't forget there was COVID in between. So when it was COVID, I was training all of my clients online. So I got a bit used to that. And I knew how to manage that, and it was all right.
And then lastly, I'm going to ask you the question that I ask every guest, which is, what's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with?
I really strongly agree with people feeling less comfortable to be racist. And I know that sounds quite like controversial, but it is. Like, you know, I can't, a lot of people feel like we live in a very touchy society now and you can't say anything. That's normally what the older generation will say. And I don't really agree. I think it's a good thing that now there are things you're not allowed to say and people are aware of that. Particularly, I'm speaking when it comes to race. But then at the same time, I don't want to take away, because although I might not feel as strongly about that when it comes to like LGBT rights, that is that's the race for some people. If I've got that rule for race, I can't not have it for everything else. But for me personally, I like the fact that people are no longer as confident or as carefree when they make certain comments around race. And I appreciate that, especially as I'm fairly new into the corporate world. I can't imagine life prior to that in the corporate world. I would have definitely really struggled. So I'm happy that I've entered at a time where people are a bit more on edge in a good way.
It's a very valid point. And I do think we should be able to also just allow people to speak their mind and have different opinions. Like that's the crux of it at the end of the day. But thank you so much for coming on, Maya. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. And also it's really nice to speak to such a strong, you're so strong-willed. It comes through so clearly. And it's like, damn, I need to be more like that.
Oh, thank you, I guess.
It is meant in a compliment, and it's really nice as well, particularly getting into careers and stuff like that. It's a really valuable skill, and I'm hoping that a lot of people get value from our conversation, particularly because it's such a true thing. I'm thinking for young people when they're getting into an industry, whether that's in tech or something completely different, it's so hard, and you're so right in terms of just keep banging on the door, and if so, keep showing up, but also do something a little bit different, and it will just begin that conversation and start your journey. But thank you so much for coming on, and of course we'll link all of your details below, the pod, your socials, everything will be below. So if you want to check her out, it's below in the caption. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Not Quite Podcast. Please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram to get regular updates about the podcast. These my doubts make it hurt.